Quiet, quiet in the chamber, quiet. All right. We're ready? All right, so we'll call the meeting to order at 4:06, and I'll ask Kate to call the roll.
Mark Prince. Kate Masnanti. First time my name was pronounced right. Kate, I'm here. Brian Mahoney. James Manny. All right. We'll put that on record that the
express your
town manager likes this time slot. Chip McGarr.
Present.
Raquel is out. Dave Palzetti.
Aye, and for the record, my boss does not like this time slot.
Lucas Murray.
Here,
Lucas Murray.
here.
All right.
All right, we good? All right, thank you. We'll move on. The approval of meeting minutes, so I posted drafts. Raquel did send me a couple sets yesterday. So I'm just going to get all the drafts up. Next meeting, I'm going to line them up, and we're just going to get them all done, what's remaining. Because I didn't want to drop something on you today again, so. All right, moving on. Review discussion regarding public correspondence. Did everyone get the correspondence from Dorold I sent out today? There were quite a few attachments to that. I did send it. I'll also post what we have. We only have a couple pieces that will go online tomorrow. Anyone have any questions, comments on what was sent? Basically, I will address Dorold. I do think it's worthy of a look at. It goes into the larger conversation of the building size and whether just basing it on a 703 population, prospective population, is appropriate. I think it's a discussion we're going to have. And Phil, I sent that to you as well. So I'd be looking in future. I don't think it's a discussion for today, but in future, having that conversation of what would be appropriate size. 703 is what would be reimbursed for.
Right, and that's something that we brought up in the last meeting, or I know I did anyway, and, but that's where it gets into, and we'll get into it later, but if Bride's saying they'll only reimburse us up to 100 million, then we go over that. Now, I think we should be going over 703, because what if all of a sudden we have this beautiful school, and now the families who have left are coming back, or people are being attracted to us, so. But no, it's a topic that we should definitely discuss.
So I think that's something that we should have a specific conversation on as the process goes on. We're at some critical decision points right now. I think once we start really digging into the building program, if we're moving in a direction of a new build, then we have to really dig into that conversation to figure it out, right? That kind of goes with the conversation we had with Mario, right? Is 200, he said that's our maximum. Well, in what way, right?
I see what you're saying.
Right. So, anyone else have any input on that? We'll have a specific topic on that to come. All right. If there's nothing else on correspondence, we'll move into the chairperson's. What's that? Oh, okay. I'll make sure that I'll send it back out. The chairperson's general correspondence. So one thing I am going to ask is I didn't include it on the agenda the first time when I posted this because we'd just gotten through the presentation. But we do have a little bit of financial updates tonight, and I asked Brian to come in. So I was looking for a motion to amend the agenda to add a financial review presentation for discussion only.
I'll make a motion to add a financial review presentation for discussion only.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So we'll add that onto the agenda as item number 6. We'll do the feedback review from council first. I'll move on because I really don't have anything else under the chairperson's report. It's only been a week since our last meeting. But we'll go on to feedback from town council from our meeting. So I'll give you an update from what we presented and then kind of what I saw at the meeting, and then I'm looking for discussion of what you saw. I know some of you were there. So we did present, myself, Brian, Phil, Jim was there, Mark was there, Kate was there in the crowd. Dave was there, who legged it out almost through midnight, right, Dave? Maybe that's what I should have done. So it was I think it was a good presentation. I felt like confident that we presented a lot of data in a reasonable amount of time. I think everyone did a great job. I think it was a lot of information for anybody to absorb. We gave them the high level on the project. We took them to financials, including bond rating and prospective financials. So I think there was a reasonable sort of flow of the information, and there were some good questions raised. The feedback. I do think a few points are of importance, and this needs to be conveyed to the school committee. The biggest thing that I took away was this council is not necessarily against the project, whether it be 65 to the 125, and where that's going to fall, I don't know yet. There wasn't an indication of, yeah, we're wholly on board with a new build or less. A lot of the conversation had to do with shared financial responsibility, and Mark stood up and spoke to that. Some, but I do think it's really a school committee conversation with council, and the school committee really needs to have that conversation as soon as possible. Because the feeling I got, and I don't know for those of you who were at the meeting what your feeling was, is that we can't move forward really on this conversation until the school committee articulates what they may or may not be able to do with regards to helping financing the project in some way. School committee controls their own budget. As we're looking for direction on finances. We can't move in that direction until that conversation occurs, because clearly that's a sticking point. So I know that the school committee and town council have a meeting on Monday night that is a budget meeting, right? Certainly could be had there to start the conversation, but I think until that's had, I didn't get the indication that we were going to get additional feedback of definitively, here's where we're looking financially on the budget, because there's no sense of payment. Kate, did you have something?
I have lots of thoughts
Go ahead.
on it, but I'm
Yeah.
going to try to taper myself. So one thing is again, it's an appropriateness of the particular meeting, right? Monday is our pre-budget meeting. I don't know, and Mark can correct me if he thinks differently, but I don't know that that's the appropriate time, because we're building our budget for next year, and this is a pre-budget meeting and to discuss that, right? And so we're looking to spell out what 22, 23 looks like. I'm on the right year. I often miss my years. Sometimes it's 23, 24. But so we're trying, because we need to open school in September 23. We need to open school September 23 with a particular budget, knowing what we're going to do based on the closure of Curtis Corner. But is Curtis Corner really going to be closed, right? Because we don't know what we're doing with swing space, like what's going to happen with that building. So, and we're in the process of sorting all that stuff out. So I don't know that Monday answers would be able, and like I said, Mark can correct me, but I don't know that Monday we could have those answers, because we're still building that out and still trying to see what it means when you take the students out of Curtis Corner and the teachers out of Curtis Corner and move them into Broad Rock. And then the expenses that we're going to inquire there. But also, like, when we're closing Curtis Corner, we're not eliminating those students, right? Those students, the kids are still in our district and still need to be educated in Broad Rock. So we're still going to need teachers who are going to educate them. So it's not like we're like, oh, we're eliminating all these teachers and we're eliminating all these staff members, because we still have to educate the kids we're bringing over to Broad Rock. So that all has to be sorted out, though. So I think that Monday, and like I said, Mark can correct me, I don't know that Monday we could have definitive answers, but it can definitely, the conversation can certainly start, that we're looking at it and mapping it out, but.
Yeah, I guess I'm simply suggesting that it's likely to come up, right? Because this is a fast approaching project, and so it's going to be this year's budget considerations. So whether the school committee is going to broach it or the town council broach it, it's likely to be a topic that's going to come up. We're advisory, right? My advice, and I think this committee's advice should be, have that conversation as soon as possible, whether it's Monday night or shortly thereafter, because the way I'm seeing it, what I got out of that meeting was, we're not going to be able to move forward with a budget. And if we don't have a budget, I don't know if it's new build or renovation. If we don't know new build or renovation, we don't have a project yet. We can't give Phil direction on start programming a new building or start looking at renovation.
For sure.
So, I mean, that's all we can say, right? Have that conversation and try to figure it out and
I
get
think
town
the
council
school
comfortable.
committee and the town council have to have that conversation, but to me, it's a dedicated meeting on that topic. Unless, like I said, unless you disagree.
I don't think Monday is the most appropriate time to have a conversation like that. Partly because, as Kate mentioned, we're in the early stages of building a budget. There are some things that we know for sure, or things that we believe based on some information. So we know what our bills are. For example, we know transportation, what the cost is, plus the 4% increase, because that's what the contract says. We still have no idea what we're getting out of RIDE. We still have no idea about the financial formula. We still have no idea about charter projections. So there's so many unknowns to sit and say definitively anything on Monday would be just a bad guess. And so Monday wouldn't be the most appropriate time to have that conversation. If the advice from this committee is, hey, school committee, town council, you guys need to sit down and have a conversation, yeah, that's fair enough, but I don't think Monday's the day to do it.
Yeah, and that's up to their respective chairs and the president of the council who sets the agenda and how they want, what topics they want to talk about. You're absolutely right. Our job is to say, have that conversation. When it happens, that's on their respective bodies. You know, we're not, I don't want this to be construed as just saying you have to have it Monday night. That's not our role. So, Jim, did you have?
I did. I don't know if I'm not sure either if Monday night's the appropriate night, but I will tell you this, it has to be soon after, if not. And we also have to bring this to a head. We have to decide on a location, once and for all. And because it's not the clock I'm worried about running out. I think we just need definitive answers. And I agree with Luke. I mean, it's obvious that the town council, that $8.8 million debt service is a big nut for this town. It really is. It's huge, the one that Brian's calculating. So we need some answers from the school department, school committee on, just give us a range of what we could think of, what we could possibly save. And I know it's a tough thing. It's not easy to come up with those numbers right now. But soon, we should have those numbers. But we definitely need to start focusing on a location if we're going to move this thing forward.
So my suggestion was, you know, as the chair, right, I believe in process, right? What would I normally do if this was a normal process, and it is a normal process, is I'd write a correspondence to the school committee chair with Mark saying, here's what we heard, you need to have this conversation, right? Also, we're going to be coming to you in early January. We have some project options. We're going to present those as it is now with what data we have, because we're at a good point to present those. And if there's anything you want to provide direction on, and you know where I'm going with this, if it's Columbia Street or CCMS, or if Broad Rock is definitely out or in, or any of that, have definitive action. Tell us now, so we don't waste our time. I don't want to spend, you know, Phil's time doing things that isn't beneficial. So then we have clarity on project, and the hope is by early January, we have clarity on the budget. So we can, once we have those two pieces of the pie, I think we'll move extremely quick, because we kind of know the projects that are baking up at this point. But we're a little bit at an impasse. I think we're still moving, right, Phil? We have background data being collected, and things aren't held up. We're in the holiday quagmire. It's a good time to pump the brakes and hang back a little bit. But when we get into early January, we're definitely going to be moving pretty quickly. We need those answers.
So I'll say one thing when it comes to the last Monday's meeting that I was very disappointed in, is that we didn't get any sort of range, right? Like none, which means we didn't get, no, we're not going over 65, which is one type of project, versus we have an appetite to do something bigger. We just want to make sure we talk about finances and shared responsibility. We got nothing. Well, I left, So,
It's a discussion, so
But-
feel free to
so-
chime in.
so if you feel that we got the, okay, we'll do up to 100, because I know that's what Rory kind of said, what does that look like? Tell us what that looks like. Then I'm okay, then I can change my tune on that, but at the moment, I was like, do we know if it's, okay, we're just looking Reno, and you can't do anything else, or are we looking, I mean, $100 million high school, new build high school is not, I don't think it's a reasonable request. So, that's kind of,
You done?
yes.
So I had a slightly different take. And maybe I'm optimistic, I don't know, but I think the case was made of the benefits of a new high school, particularly with the bleed we're having of families. And, we've been at this table for a few months, and, we showed there was a need, thanks to, Studio Jade and Phil's help. We demonstrated the need. RIDE agreed that there's a need. I think we're collectively in agreement that the most bang for the buck is a new high school. And this is the one time that we can afford it, because if we miss these additional reimbursements, it's an extra $20 million, and then it's an unaffordable project. So if we're gonna do a high school, it's gonna happen now. I think that message was pretty clear to the town council. I think it was well received, and I felt that there was an appetite to do that. And the number was $125 million. That's not the total project costs, because there's things that we have to do at Broad Rock and the elementary schools and other things. And my sense from the town council was, we're interested in the high school, and we're interested in bonding potentially up to 125, but no more, because there could be other projects, and we don't want to basically put our bond rating in too much of a jeopardy. It might go down, but it won't. We don't definitely want to, torpedo it. Plus, we might have other projects that have to fit in that total $200 million cap. I don't know, putting words in your mouth, but that's kind of the sense I got from them. They didn't want to go any more than 125. So what was left hanging was whether or not the school department is able to support some of the bond debt with, and that includes not just the 125 million, but any small projects to get Broad Rock ready to do things to the elementary schools or any other kind of work like that. Which is, this is the time to do it, because we'd get 52% reimbursement for deferred maintenance on the elementary schools. It's a perfect time to do it. Superintendent, I thought, was very clear that there was going to be some savings by closing Curtis Corner. It'll definitely be closed for a full year, if not a year and a half, even with swing space. It's going to be mothballed, and there won't be any staff in there other than custodial and minor maintenance. The crux of the issue is there basically appetite by the school department to tighten their belts a little bit to find that savings within their budget, inefficiencies of some sort, whether it's staff, whether it's building utilities or operations, really tighten their belts. And instead of getting that standard 1% to 2% that they get every year extra, to cut that back, tighten up. Still, I'm not saying you have to go against contractual benefits, but if you can find a certain amount, and maybe it's $1 million. I don't know what the town council is asking for. I think they just want some. Actually, Deb's sitting there. She said it. Skin in the game. And if that's there, I think the town council was willing to push forward. That's the way I took it. Like, they just want some reassurance that they're not going to put all this bond debt on top of the taxpayers, in addition to what they've been seeing as creep all along. My opinion. But I was more optimistic that they were supporting the new high school. They didn't care where yet. We didn't give them a location. And that we could do it at 125, but we can't go to 140. And 65, I think, personally, I don't think 65 is worth it. And I thought the discussion was above 100 up to 125.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else want to weigh in? Jim?
I had the same takeaway Dave did. I think that meeting did not go smooth, let's not kid ourselves. But that takeaway was what I saw, that the council overall had an appetite for a new school, that a location that we have to choose very soon. But I think I think that's what the council was looking for. Listen, when Curtis Corner closes, there's gonna be some savings, right? And, you know, Mark and I had a meeting a day or two later, and we talked a little bit about it, that's between him and I, what we talked about at that point in time. But there's gonna be some savings, so what are those savings? Will the FTEs be maintained, the numbers that are there? At what percent will they not be, or will they be? Those are all numbers you have to provide, not me or anyone here, except school committee and the superintendent. So, but I think once that starts coming into focus, I think we can get this over the finish line. That's my impression.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd just be mindful to tell people, I think the school department has skin in the game. And to imply that we don't, I don't think is an accurate picture. There will be some savings from closing Curtis Corner Middle School and combining it with Broad Rock. What those savings are, I have no idea. But we should also be mindful that there are requirements that we have to meet. And there are some things where tightening the belt, I believe was said. There needs to be some reasonableness around the tightening of the belt, because we have obligations that we have to meet as well. And I get the sense, not just from the town council, but from other folks, the apprehension about putting the cost all on the town. And I don't think that's what the school committee wants to do. But I also would be remiss if I didn't point out that we too, in our role and capacity, have obligations, and we have to meet those. Or better yet, we will meet those.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody else? So, you know, the course moving forward, and I tend to agree more on the Dave and Jim's side. I think what I got out of it was, I was actually pretty positive. I didn't hear no. I didn't hear, oh, renovate, definitely not doing 125 million, right? If people have strong opinions on that, we would have heard it. So that lack of strong opinion on a full project was, I thought, a good thing, right? Means that people have an open mind, means people still talking. So I walk away from the table and I felt pretty good. I think we did a decent job presenting the information. We had good questions. I think we're just at a point where some additional conversation needs to happen. I think there's a realization that schools have additional burdens, and that's not going to go away. It's just what the net savings is, right? When you know, we all have contractual obligations. What can you take away to soften the burden moving forward? So I think it'll be a good conversation. So my intent is to have a formal communication to the school committee through the chair and Mark to basically say, you need to have this conversation, and we're going to be coming to you for some project option and guidance early January. We'd like to get on the agenda, your first agenda available. And hopefully my goal would be by mid-January, we have some sense, and maybe we're going back to town council at that point, maybe the second one in January. I would hate to see January come and go, and we still don't have this guidance, because once we start getting past that, we're running the risk of not having a project, which then pushes it, and I don't think that's going to bode well for us. So does anyone have any objection to me writing that correspondence or what I just said? Okay. So I think that'll bring clarity of process to everybody, and they can deal with it as they go.
I agree with
That,
that.
Dave? Yeah?
I want to add that, and don't take this the wrong way, and it's going to come off, no matter how I say it, it's going to be harsh. We've known that Wakefield School and Curtis Corner were going to be closed. We've known that for months. And I know the school department is understaffed, and I appreciate that. But this is coming at us really quickly. We have a very limited amount of time to make a decision, or we're going to miss the opportunity to make it better for decades for our teachers, for our staff, and for our students. So I think a little more effort needs to be put in to figuring out what those savings are. I do this in my regular job. Millions of people do this in their regular jobs. It's not rocket science. If you have to hire an outside consultant to do that, please do that. We have to have that information, because if the number is 100,000, we're not doing a project. If the savings is $1 million, maybe we're doing a project. If the savings is $2 million, we're jumping in probably. And if it's a recurring savings, this might be a no-brainer, and we can go to 140 million because we can do these other projects off to the side, bond 125, and do some real improvements. We have one chance here to get 52.5% reimbursed. And I don't want to see it missed because we're administratively delayed in finding savings that we should be able to determine based on utilities, staffing with known enrollment coming in, known number of classrooms in the middle school, known number of classrooms in the high school, and what that staffing has to be. You know what your contractual pay raises are for the staff you're going to keep. You don't have to have it to the penny, but it should be within the $100,000 range. And it's been months. So crucify me if you want. I just don't know what's taking so long.
We won't crucify you, Dave, don't worry.
They're people, Dave, they're not widgets. You got to build a school for sixth grade through eighth grade, and you got to meet their academic needs, their social needs, their social emotional needs, and you got to do it within 2 different spaces. And you got to deal with the teachers and the programs that come with it. It's relatively easy to sit down and pontificate about what happens in a school, but it's a complex organization. Some parts of that you mentioned are simplistic, but other parts are very difficult. And so we'll take the necessary time to do it right for the kids, and we'll meet our obligations with this work with this committee. We won't miss the target.
We don't need perfect. We need close. We need good. And if most of that is simplistic,
As I said, we won't miss the target.
the target's next week.
No, it's not.
So, listen, we provide recommendation, right? Our role is to try to keep everyone moving in the same direction, tell them what we need by when. In the end of the day, if the respective bodies come to an impasse, so be it. I would love to do a project for the schools because I think that kids deserve it, but,
I think it's a so be it situation.
well,
I mean, to Dave's point, it's not like they're at an impasse, so we're not doing anything is not an option, right? That's not an option, right? So Dave is
I don't
correct to a point, right? We need to get it done, and an impasse isn't an option. We have to come to an agreement. Our 2 bodies have to come to agreement, and we have to work together to do what's right,
I agree.
right?
I agree.
So no, so be
I'm
it.
just trying to peel us back off, just trying to get everyone on our roll, right? We're getting into things that are other people's responsibilities. I think they're going to hear it crystal clear. To be honest, I'm being honest. If we don't get the direction, we don't have a project. That's it. So I'll leave it there.
I will say this, though, doing nothing is an option. Not a good option, but it's an option that we're all trying to avoid, every one of us. So we got to keep that in mind, because 2 years ago, it turned out to be not an option. We don't want that.
All right. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, financial review for presentation discussion only. So what I've done is I whittled down the presentation from the other night. The reason I did this because this body didn't really have a chance to look at the financials. We presented to council, and we didn't really have a chance to dig in at all. So I asked Brian to come. The idea is just to give us and those who may not have been there an overview of what was presented. And again, I did whittle this down, so let me get this up. There we go. All right. So I'll run through a few of these slides. We've seen a lot of this data, and that's why I extracted a lot of it. Oh, yeah. We can, All right. So as I was saying, we showed a lot of these, well, we showed all of them to council. I've whittled it down a little bit. A lot of this, we know intrinsically because we've been part of the process for so long. So Phil had presented that the 10-year forecast need was the 102.8 million. This is in our stage one. This is something that he's brought up over and over again. We gave them a breakdown of that 102, and the immediate needs, which would be the 5-year at the $37.5 million, was the recommended. The programmatic needs, we presented as the 20 million number. This included hazard building, which, you know, we've discussed of potentially putting administration into that building. West Kingston and Matunic, the programmatic there at the 7.5 is really the gymnasium and really the enhanced programmatic improvements. Broad Rock, Peacedale, you see at the 1 million, and then the high school was not included in that $20 million number. We addressed the high school specifically because that was a primary focus of the presentation. At the 49.5 million, that was the projected deferred maintenance and what we were calling preservation. Kind of remolded the terminology here as preservation and innovation. Preserve what you have, or do we start looking a little bit more forward? So this was the buckets that we presented as far as the options. $125 million new build, the $65 million, which came from Phil, of what would be a mix of deferred maintenance and some programmatic to kind of get an existing building renovation to a point where it starts looking like a newer. The difficulty, and we express that, is the building's so large that once you start chipping away, how far can you get with that $65 million with a balance of the programmatic and deferred maintenance? The second tier we presented was the $20 million of the district deferred maintenance. The Broad Rock Middle School innovation, we called it, because obviously we have consolidation going on. The kids are going to be going over there, so we felt that that should be really a point of consideration. And the hazard building, which we didn't focus on, but one of the big factors in that is if we were able to relocate the administration into that building, that does save another footprint. Like we're essentially moving them out. I say save, which really allows us to get rid of that footprint eventually. So reduction of facilities and square footage is always a good thing operationally. Elementary school programmatic, Phil went through this and basically presented in terms of these are nice to haves, but right now with the potential consolidation future, if we had to cut anything at this point, that may be where you cut because that's where the gymnasiums are. And it's not that it's not important, but in terms of, and we know this may get an expensive project quick, that we wanted to provide the options to council to say, all right, what's sort of our need, absolute need, which we're really focused on the high school, the second tier needs and sort of the third tier needs. And obviously all of this is needed in some way, shape, or form, but it's how you cobble it together. So we presented some images, and I wanted to thank Phil and his team on very short notice. I said, it'd be nice to see a little bit of inspiration here, because a lot of people can't really envision what new looks like. So we went through some options, and this may or may not be the building footprint, right? But the idea is it presents a vision of what the future could be as compared to what it is now. Because a lot of people see what's there now and says, it looks fine, it's a school, but, when you compare it to today's more modern schools, it starts giving you a vision. So again, these are strictly just images of what could be, but I think more, the internal focus was more what a new school would look like, higher ceilings, more light, movable furniture, cafe style, right? If you go to North Kingstown, everything's, I think they're the Skippers, everything's based on a nautical theme, but it's a very light and airy sort of cafeteria space. And then, the hallways being more of these fuzzy instructional spaces with breakout spaces for the students, and more like what you'd see on a college education campus. So then we moved into financial considerations, and Brian, do you want to take this one and go through some of your assumptions and whatnot?
So in terms of assumptions, this is actually a change from the other night. We were asked at the meeting to look into both a 25-year and a 30-year amortization, so that's been added here. We were informed similar to when going for a loan on your own. You increase the term, the rates will go up. So we were told that on a 25-year term, the rate would go from 4.25 to 4.35, and a 30-year it would go to 4.45. Beyond that, in terms of assumptions, we're assuming a bond issuance in 2026 fiscal year with a slow ramp-up of funding over the first several years. We have included PAYGO funding assumptions, and this is based on average assessed home values of $401,370. As a result of this, and this is, and just to clarify, the top number of the 125, that is based on the 20-year amortization. But to go through this, or really the area in red, as you can see, that is going to be the annual debt service for the various options. That is net of the state reimbursement. So that you'll see the first column, the 8.8 million for the 125 million state share. So that middle column with the red is net of state reimbursement. So the 125, you'd be looking at 5.4 million roughly, or estimated, I should say, annually. 65 million would be the 2.3 annually. 20 million would be the 721,000, and so on and so on. 90,000 for the 2.5 and 577 for the 16 million.
And, yep,
So when it's laid out like that, right, the assumption is obviously high school
Renovation.
rebuild and then renovation, and then the 20 mil is like the rest of the schools,
deferred
right?
maintenance, yep.
For the rest of the schools. So in theory, the idea would, those would be combined if we were doing one big, huge, large project,
Yes,
right?
yes, so if it was the
So then
120,
then I'm assuming at that point, then those other numbers would also shift. It wouldn't be like 183.5 plus 95.5 plus 29.2, or excuse me, 183 plus 29, or would it be? If
Yeah,
we added
yes.
125 and 20 million together and bonded at that number, right? So now you're bonding at 145. Would those two estimated total costs be added together? Or would it come out to a different range because it was one?
they would be added together. Again, estimated at this time, they could change, but yes, these numbers right here are based on if we were to add them together, yes.
All right, thanks.
The idea was, we talked earlier about trying to create sort of an à la carte menu of items. It's difficult, right? You gotta figure out some buckets to put this in. But I think it gives, now, some ranges could be picked within this. But the idea was to give a sense of where the different scales are at the different projects. And I think it achieves that goal because you can really see the differences in the financing. And
It does, but at the same time, it's like, well, you can only do the high school. You know what I mean? Like because if we're going over 125, then, like I said, if we're not going over 125, then we can only do the one
They didn't
project.
specifically say that, it was just my impression that they were at 120.
I was the impression, that I got it was actually lower than that, but,
But it doesn't mean that the other $20 million projects couldn't be funded outside of a bond via another method, which I'll leave the geniuses to figure that out.
money tree?
It doesn't mean,
it's just,
it doesn't, I mean, we're talking about bonding 125, it doesn't mean your total project cost is only 125. There's other sources of funds.
Yeah, I mean, as a reminder, though, this is one of the only sources of funds that has that reimbursement. So that cost will go up significantly. You know, let's say we delay a year or two, all of these costs will go up exponentially. And I'm not plugging it, but you're right. Yeah, as long as we have a funding source, yes. Yep. Yeah, in theory, yes, yeah, you're right.
sure.
Go start looking for a benefactor quick, right? But you're absolutely right. It does not have to be of the same bond. It can be funded as long as it's
As long as
funded
it's
in
the
this
same
time frame
project.
as part of the
Yeah,
project.
yeah, yeah.
You're correct. Yep. So we wanted to run, so this is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian. So this is the estimated cost of the tax.
Oh, yeah, okay,
right, to
that's,
break down,
yeah, I'm getting the
Get you
pages all mixed up.
resituated.
Sorry.
20-year term.
Yes, so based on the same screen, so this breaks it out for taxpayers on average that we referenced before, based on an average assessed value of the 401,370. This projects impact to the taxpayer on that property of $286 for the 125 million bond, and it goes down from there, then the 117 for the 65, but this breaks out what the cost to the taxpayers would be based on these projects.
So this is this is really the slide that taxpayers want to see, right? What's the impact of my house? I can estimate based on my appraised value. I think the mill rate is also of importance. Right now, we're at $10.95 per thousand. And we did explain whatever value they select, whether it's 125, 65, or 25, any amount's going to be rolled in over time because we have other expenses, right? So we need to fund those. So ideally, you're splitting that over 3 or 4 years, slowly integrating the rate. And again, any savings or whatnot, the picture is going to change over time. So whatever savings we can recoup, or, we didn't expect ARPA funds either, right? COVID came in, ARPA funds came in. Things happen. So whatever comes along that time to soften the burden, we would do.
The one thing that should have been mentioned the other night, and I'll mention now, we will be, if we're projecting a issuance in fiscal year '26, that is the same year we'll be going through the next reval, which will reshuffle the tax rates and could impact this as well, just to put that into the equation as well.
Good point. Yeah, Brian?
Just one idea that came up after hearing council's comments the other night and the presentation, and just as my taxpayer brain, next time we present the numbers, possibly putting a debt schedule on there, because I think one of the biggest issues that came up with some of the council members was what this looks like compared to other projects the town's trying to do. I know a big water project was brought up, which isn't our charge, but if we show, in the first 5 years, this amount was paid back, so just to kind of give the town that picture showing, you see that $125 million number, and it's daunting, and you think that if the, total capacity for the town is 200 and you're taking 125 just for the schools, some people would instantly vote no, just seeing that. But if they saw the debt schedule and, hey, first year, 8.8 million of that comes off, I think that might be good to present.
Good feedback. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I think that is important. And it also, we don't carry a lot of debt now. People, once that debt falls off, too, the town has the benefit. They can go 2 ways. Once the whole debt falls off, is you can lower the tax rate back down, or you can refocus on other priorities without adding any other tax hit. It's already built into the budget. So, we're just not in that situation right now. Good point. All right. Alternate 25-30 year, Brian?
Okay. So this was run based on the requests or what was talked about the other night at the council meeting. So I'm not sure what the expectation was for the 25 and 30. It obviously spreads the pain a little more over the 5 years, obviously, over the 25, obviously 5 additional years, over the 30, 10 additional years. The thing to keep in mind with that, as I mentioned earlier, the interest rate is going up on both of these. So it's going from a 4.25 on a 20 to a 4.35 on a 25 and a 4.45 on a 30. So you're going to be paying more interest. And also, we're getting the same amount of state aid whether we do it 20 years or 25 or 30. So you're now getting less state aid on an annual basis because you're just dividing that up. So even though we're paying a little less in terms of debt on an annual basis because we're spreading it further, we're also getting less state aid in on an annual basis. So the actual, I think I'm on my wrong slide. The actual savings on an annual basis is not substantial.
You want me to go to the next slide?
No, that's fine. I'm looking actually just a few lines over, just the total net impact. So not two columns over from where the red is. That's that's the annual debt service is what's colored in red. The 2 lines over, that's the annual minus state aid, and that's what the town would be responsible for. So you're seeing a decrease of 300,000 on the 25 year, and then another 200,000 on a 30 year. So not substantial decreases in those regards because of, again, and the other thing to keep in mind that I'd like to point out also, the last column, you're seeing on the 25 year, you're paying an additional 20 million in interest, and then on the 30 year, you're then doing another 20 million on top of that. So certainly more interest over the term as well.
That's how much it would cost the town, but was the question, and I don't know why, I'm assuming the question was if it was a longer bond, it would be less impact
Correct, on an annual
tax
basis.
payers
Yes.
numbers. and I think that's what he was looking for.
Yes, and it is bringing it down on an annual basis. I mean, 300,000 and then another 500,000 overall for the 30 year. So it is bringing it down. I would assume that they might have been looking for a little more there.
So that's this impact, which, as you can see, it's fairly negligible. You're spending upwards of $40 million extra
Right.
to reduce it by, $15 a year on an average house, or $20. Is it really worth it? Because that's money given away, right? That's just plain interest. So obviously, like financing anything, like a house, if you can go 15 years, you're gonna save a lot of money. We're in a pretty good financial situation. Again, this is a council call. We'll present the numbers as is, but, it's kind of telling, like, it's really a balance, but once you hit higher terms, because of the higher interest rate, it just doesn't seem to work out. But I think information is power, and that's on the council to decide.
Brian, with the Fed coming out with another 0.5% increase, yesterday was it, or the day before? How does that affect that bond?
As of right now, our financial advisors have held strong with what they're projecting for us. So they're holding with the 4.25 for the 20 year, and then the 4.35 for 25, and 4.45 for 30. They still feel comfortable with that.
Does anybody have any other input or questions on this slide? It's pretty self-explanatory. I'll make sure this gets up on the website as well tomorrow. The presentation from Monday is already up, so if anybody wants to see that, it's there. So I'll kind of skim through this because we did present a bond rating analysis. And I went through essentially what bond ratings are, and I likened it to a credit score because it's very analogous in a lot of ways. Going to buy your car, a house, whatever. If you have a good credit score, obviously whatever you buy is potentially going to impact your credit score. But you go down, eventually you build it back up. We're going to be making payments. We're a financially stable organization. That's not to soften the impact at all. It has real value. We have the highest bond rating in the state. It's a sense of pride for the community, and that's really a value judgment on where we want to go with that. And it takes some time to get it back. But, the really question is, do we have future borrowing needs? And we did get into, which I'll talk about in a minute, the impact of that. The thing I focused on was leverage. We don't really have a lot of leverage. We don't have a lot of borrowed money right now. All of the other categories we're strong in. We really don't have a way to improve our score in any other way other than just not to borrow money and keep our leverage low. So, of course, when you borrow money for a project of this size, it's likely to impact the bond rating of our organization. So, and I presented it as any borrowing may have an impact because that's the truth. We have an indicative rating, and which I'll show next, but there's no guarantees that depending on what we borrow, they may come down and say, you know what, situation has changed. I highly doubt it because since our last bond rating, we went through a reval and our total assets went upwards of what, $2 billion? So we're in a very healthy financial tax-based situation. So this is tough to see, and again, you can download, but I really focused on the leverage scores, and really the only thing that changes in all of these is the leverage score goes up as you borrow more money. So that impacts our score, and what I presented was, which was presented to us by PFM, is at the $65 million threshold. Beyond that, and we don't know exactly where, but upwards of that, we risk a downgrade in the bond rating, so to a AA2, which I think is what Narragansett's at right now, right, Jim? And surrounding communities, many surrounding communities are at the AA2. I think we're the only AA1 in the area. Again, source of pride, definitely, something we want to consider, but that's a, what's that?
I was going to say, but it,
No, it doesn't, and,
that as a
you know,
selling point.
I likened it to, when you go to buy a house, your first consideration is not, is it going to affect my credit score? Usually you're saying, do I have enough credit score to go buy a house? And if you do, you go buy the house because that's a need, right? I need a new car, I need whatever. Your first consideration is how much do you pay per month? Can you afford it, and can you build into a budget? You deal with the credit after because you know you can build your credit back. So I liken it to that. Others may have a different opinion. Some people may be very focused on this, and, that's not an unreasonable attitude either, so trying to present it as fair as possible,
I think the residents of the town are very focused on this.
And they may be,
They really are. I mean, I see it, you see me wandering around town hall all day, right? I mean, there was an elderly woman in the tax collection office the other day sobbing, crying her eyes out because of $148 in her taxes she couldn't come up with. We cannot forget, you know, those people in this town. I understand we're trying to attract families, but we can't forget, there's a lot.
And that is 100% understood. There isn't a single person, my parents live in this town. My brother lives in this town. Like, I completely get that, but I'm talking about the bond rating number. Like, that between an A1 and AA1 and an AA2, she's not sobbing about the bond rating.
No, she's not talking about the
her
bond rating,
taxes.
but that bond rating is tied to how much we borrow and how much we pay for roads and how much we pay for water towers and how much we pay for everything. We can't forget that. Like, you know, it's like paying a higher credit card interest rate because you owe more on it, right? Our credit is so good, it's gold in this, you know, one of 5 communities, and we're the highest of the 5. So we can never forget that, you know, decades got us to that point. And then I know the other argument, we didn't invest in the schools, and that's why it's so high. I know that argument. But we just cannot forget that that rate is going to dictate what we're paying for roads and school, for roads, water, sewers, everything.
Good points on both sides, and that's the debate that's going to be had, right, going forward.
Financially, would we be able to ask, is it PFM, if, just a round number, say we did a $125 million project, nothing else in the town, again, our charge is the school, how many years after payments it would take back to get to AA1? Just a ballpark, if they would say, roughly within 5 years, you could be back at an AA1, or it might be 10 years. Would that
I'm
be
going to
something?
say, I mean, we probably won't know until we meet with Moody's. So we got an estimate to do a
numbers and I
true
get-
scorecard,
Because
and it was 40.
decades to get to that point. I think it would take decades to get back if we got back to that point. So
Yeah, I mean, potentially, and Steve Massaroni, he deals with at least half the towns in the state, right, if not more, and he's very good wealth of knowledge, and we asked him a lot of these same questions. He didn't even know, you know, he said school debt is a very different type of debt, and there has to be a consideration that it's secured in some way on the reimbursement, so it does lower your obligations. So he was still a little vague, and we got an estimate to do a true projection from Moody's. It was $40,000, and I said, at this point, let's pump the brakes, because I don't know if, you know, again, if the central focus becomes the hitching point is the bond rating, then maybe we do that analysis, but there's a lot of other pieces of the puzzle here, right? The first is just the affordability component, which I think may be the bigger conversation on what Jim's talking about, the people on the tax rates, and of course, it's going to, you know, whatever bond is going to have to go to the voters for approval. They're going to weigh in, so.
At the end of the day, that's where it's gonna lay. As long as everybody else says yes, it'll be the town who decides.
Right, if it gets to that point, yeah, and that will be so.
To Luke's point on that, one contributing factor why we really can't get a definitive, here's when we're going to get back, or here, Moody's came out November 9th, actually, so less than a month ago, or no, what's the date today? Oh, just over a month ago. They have a new they came out with a new methodology on their grading of cities and towns. So we actually, I don't think we've had anybody in Rhode Island go through this yet. I don't think anybody's issued a bond yet, and that's kind of part of the trepidation, or why that really can't answer it yet, because this is new, and there isn't really a track record yet.
Phil, not to put you on the spot, but you had mentioned North Providence was having discussion on this as well, right? So any insight on, from your perspective? Non-answer, answer. So, yeah, so, you know, at least they're consistent.
So back to Brian's pot of gold.
There's gonna be a rumor flying around about you, my friend.
What's to say, you know we have to, you know, if we build at Columbia Street, we need to keep Curtis Corner around, mothballed until it eventually becomes swing space, but,
Yeah, I can. We're not done with the presentation.
yeah, no, you don't have to change it back. I'm not gonna be long. Or, but what about, like, South Road School, Wakefield School, if the town could actually sell those to Doral, then he can open a pickleball stadium or something. Would that money be able to bring back to the town, be brought to the school project, so that we don't have to bond as much because we could pay it off with another asset?
I mean, I don't want to speak for the town manager. In theory, yes, anything.
Yeah, so
revenue.
those are definite considerations that we will be bringing, I will be bringing to the council at some point. The surplus properties in town, And I'm actually looking with the solicitor now to see what type of restrictions are on these properties, where they could be sold or not. But obviously, that's a major policy decision by the town council. But that is something that I will be bringing to the council at some point.
It's in the basket of possibilities. We won't call it the
dreaming.
bucket of gold.
Just trying to find it.
So
I want to get there without killing the
we'll move
tax
through
rate.
this. I want to allow some discussion and some public comments. So I put a big asterisk on this, and it's all for all the reasons I just said. You know, a little of this is soft conversation from Moody's and our PFM. We did receive some feedback saying, you know, what would A1 versus A2 look like? And Steve's words were about 20 basis points, which is 0.2%. So meaning that whatever we borrow at today at A1 would be less than, you know, would be obviously at a 0.2% interest rate bump, you know, just like we would if we extended terms of a bond. I had mentioned that, you know, it has a psychological impact, and that's real for the town, you know, feeling like you were first and now you're not. And that's likely to weigh in. So what we really boiled it down to is, are we in a net positive position to be able to do something? Yes. What? We don't know. You know, we'll cobble together. I think in discussions where Brian and I have been attached to hip for the past couple of weeks talking about this, the general sense is we can work it out. We can find a financial plan to make it work, whatever we do, but there's going to be some pain involved because somebody's got to pay for it. So that's the real discussion. You know, taxpayers ultimately are going to foot their share, and we can't determine that as administration. You know, we can make the numbers work, but does it work for the town? And that's where policy comes in. And then I'll just finish out with some of the other images that Phil and his team came up with that I thought were inspiring for the future, depending on what we do, but certainly, you know, looking forward. And, you know, these are the new classrooms, right? Movable furniture, light, airy, clean, styling, catering to new teaching environments. You know, not everyone's facing the front board. You know, there's pods and different ways to teach now. Some of the existing, some of the proposed, the existing, proposed. I like the logos. And that's that. So I'll open it up for any input on the presentation, anything else that you saw or maybe didn't see. And I'll go to my left. I'll call on Chip first.
I'm all set at this time.
In a few words. Thanks, Chip. Mark, did you have anything?
Talks all day.
No? Jim?
Nothing that I haven't already said.
Okay.
I'll start this off.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank everybody who presented and came out the other day. It was, again, my taxpayer hat, being here for the last couple of years as an employee and for 6-7 years as a taxpayer. I feel a lot better energy, input from the town council and residents and people I bump into at Shaw's this go around than last go around. So it's really encouraging. Even if we, you know, do get into arguments with different groups or anything, it feels, you know, there's a lot of great input coming from the town side, so, from all the town members, so.
They're not arguments, they're discussions, right?
You can have harsh words without yelling.
That's right.
No, I agree, and what I did not mean to infer at all that the presentation that was given, I thought the presentation that was given on Monday night was wonderful, and as a fellow town council member, a town council member said she's lived this for the past 3 years, and as have I, so I will give up that maybe my nerves were a little raw at the moment. But I still, I think that the discussions are necessary, and if they get heated, they get heated. But as long as we're moving in a forward direction, and that's what the purpose of the discussions and questions are for, not to hold us back, then I think we'll be good. So, but I agree with what Brian's saying. The vibe that I get from the community at large is very positive about the direction that we're talking, as long as there are a couple decisions that need to be made that we, to everybody's point, need to be made sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Dave, anything else?
I'm not trying to go crazy with the tax rate, just want to put that out there. I don't want to spend, I'm just trying to find a way to get to the finish line with as much pain to the taxpayers as possible. But I do think we need to get to the finish line with the new high school. I think it's what the community deserves.
I'm good. I've said everything I need to say, so I'll open it up for any public comment on this discussion item only regarding the presentation to council or anything we've presented on this item. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. On this item, Dorald, or another item? We're going to be skipping the public comment, open. Yeah, if you want to talk about bonding, that's fine. Yep. Come on up. Yep. We will have a hard stop at 5:30. This is primarily the last agenda item we really don't have. Go ahead, Doral.
Can you go back to that slide? Could you go back to that slide that showed how much it would cost the taxpayer?
This is the one that one?
Yeah, that's good.
Should I get popcorn for this one, Doral, or what?
Okay. So, 1.25 million, 125 million, $286 a year for the average taxpayer. So, the question is, and it's 5.5. Can you go back to the one that shows how much debt? There we go. All right, 5.4 million. And let's say we add the 20 million for the other schools on that. So total of like 6 million. $6 million, okay. And I know I harp on this all the time, but it's the majority of that money needs to come out of the school budget. Now, I know there's contractual obligations, but we have maybe the lowest student to full-time employee. I think we have the lowest student to full-time employee ratio in the state of Rhode Island, 5.6 students per employee. A normal, just an average ratio is 7-to-1. In 2015, we had, so 20 years ago, we had 7-to-1, 7.0-to-1. Then it went down. Then it started to go back up. In 2015, it got up all the way up to 6.75, 6.75 students per employee. So over the last 7 or 8 years, it's gone from that now back down to an all-time low of 5.6. Over that period of time, we've lost, over the 20 years, we've lost 43% of our students. We've lost 25% just over since 2012. 25% of our students have gone. But that ratio has to come up. It's a ratio that can't be justified. It can't be justified by our performance on assessment tests. I just looked at the latest assessment test, the school scores just came out. And finally, we have a 5-star school in Matunic, and our high school went up to 4 stars. Okay, but what I'm saying is this.
We're a building committee, right? So
Right, but what I'm
on
saying is,
scores and stuff.
the money, if if the school district makes a commitment that over the next 4 years, they can lower their compensation cost by having fewer people working here, which obviously you would think they would have when we're going to close 2 schools. We have a very old workforce. There has to be people that are coming off retirement. Maybe this is the year for early retirement bonuses, incentives. We have fewer students in East Greenwich, but our budget's $20 million higher every year. That $6 million should come out of the $20 million. And it can. Over the next 3 or 4 years, you could bring that down, so that would be a permanent $6 million reduction. I'm only asking for 6 out of 20. 6 out of 20. Can you go to back to that slide for the PIP?
Which one?
6 out of 20 makes that 286 go to 0. That's how you get buy-in by the taxpayers.
Thanks, Darrell. Anybody else have any comments on this topic? Okay. We'll move on. So the master schedule, I won't, we've already talked about the, we've already talked about the council presentation, so I think we're good there. Yes, we have cookies in case, thanks Phil for that. Moving on to the master schedule. So we are going to have to create a new master schedule. Our existing one is running out and we've kind of modified. I'm aware of that. We're all aware of that. I think the plan is going to be, if nobody objects, is I'm going to sit with Phil, merge his anticipated timeline with our timeline generally. Some of that's going to have to also be amended because depending on when decision-making process happens, when we can move forward. There was a suggestion about potentially moving meeting times. So we don't have to decide tonight, but if people have a preferred alternate, and we get consensus, I'm okay with moving the meeting times. There are considerations on that. So I know 5. So, that's something we can discuss now. Do people feel like an alternate time is better?
So my suggestion is that the reason why it was so late is because we wanted the opportunity for community members to join. Now, right, so we don't want to miss out on that, but at the same time, not a lot of community members have been coming. So they are watching on YouTube, they are commenting, they are very informed, I hear about it all the time. So I don't have a problem keeping it, but I also am one of the closer people who live here, so I'm not the one who's driving an hour and a half to.
Dave, you said 5 would be the earliest, right?
5 is fine, 6 is fine.
Ryan, any strong opinions either way?
Yeah, either way. Yeah.
Jim, any strong opinion either way?
I only live 4 minutes, so whatever it is, it is. I don't see a big number changing from 4:30 to 6 like we had last time. I think we do have some members that live pretty far, so.
Mark,
Whatever you guys think.
any input? No? Chip? No? Brian, you don't count. So, I'm fine either way. I see the reasonability of community participation. However, we do live stream now, so I think it makes it convenient for people to sit at home during the meeting and watch them. So I'm fine with 5 o'clock. So if we wanted to pull it back a little bit, we all have busy lives. I'm fine with that too. So if nobody has any objection, we're certainly fine with 5. So what I'll do is I'll roll on the schedule. We'll create a tentative because I'd rather come up with something for you to respond to than saying, all right, let's hash it out here. And then we can just redline it in the next meeting, and then we'll come up and we can post it. Does that sound fair? All right, good enough. All right, public outreach and communication activities, item 9. So, right now, we've had the boards out, we've had the work sessions. I don't know when we're going to want to have another one. We can look at the schedule on that. Does anybody have any comments or concerns about public outreach so far? And the website's being updated every Friday. I'm trying to stay on top of that to ensure the latest presentations go out, the communications go out, and that's refreshed.
People are utilizing the website. I refer people to it all the time, and people are going there. It is a little like, initially, it's hard to determine where the documents are, because it's so like agenda-like, but once you tell people how to get somewhere, it's pretty easy to navigate around, so I think we're doing a good job.
I'm open to suggestions. You know, we're kind of pigeonholed in a little bit of a format with the way our website works, so there's only so much manipulation I can do, but if there's something that you have suggestions on, I'm all ears, we can make it work.
I think just like we've done in the past, asking the school committee and the town council, both for their help advertising too, at each of their meetings, just kind of reminders, or hey, if you're interested, here's the link, or go to our website for the school building committee if you're interested. That gets to a lot of eyes out there in the community.
Okay. Yeah, and, you know, the one thing I would ask, Phil, maybe we can communicate on this. It'd be nice to have a flyer, like a generic one, that's like, get involved in the school building, you know, something more descriptive with the website that we can pass out. Like, I'm thinking Saturday night, we have a big lighting out here. We have other events. If people have events they're going to, it's kind of a canned thing that we can give to somebody and say, hey, can you pass these out? You know, and I think that's a good, because you go where the people are at. And we have a lot of events going on. We've talked before about boards and commissions, but, you know, just thinking of that event, that's one event where you may catch 100 people that are interested in town activities. So I'm sure Phil will help with that.
Putting a QR code on those would probably be helpful too.
QR code, okay. That's good. And we do have that. We have it on the boards, so we can definitely add that. All right. We'll move on. Any general public comment at this time? We have about 12 minutes left. Anybody have any general comment? Anyone other than Doral first? No? No offense, Doral. I'm just making sure everyone has an opportunity.
He usually lets people go in front of him.
No,
He's
no,
like,
I know,
I'm
he's
going
courteous.
last.
Come on up, Doral.
We're going to give you a bonus 2 minutes.
That's right. 5 minutes you got.
Kill more trees, Doral. Don't give
I did send it out, communication, so, you know, yeah, we have it digitally, so I don't want to waste your paper. I actually printed out.
All right, so I've been, even before this happened, over the last couple of years, I've been following the legislation affecting, you know, how much money this school aid. Okay, so Mr. Carreno the other night said a couple of things which I'm not sure are correct, but you know, I'm asking you guys to find out. The first one has to do with the green technology that for energy conservation, that there's a bonus that's available for that. Well, it's not on their website, because on their website, when you go to the form, that actually brings up all the bonuses that are supposedly available at this moment. There's no energy conservation listed on there. Now, in January, the treasurer, Mr. Mazinger, proposed that legislation that would have added that, and also with minority businesses getting some preferential treatment for you know, construction and stuff for these projects. It was the Senate and the House both put in legislation, but it didn't get passed. The House held it for further, and so that kind of killed it. So I don't think that's real. The other thing he said was talking about the 40%, and I looked that up yesterday. The 40%, you know, go up to 40% bonus, minimum bonus. there was one more portion to that bill, and it was 40% minimum bonus for districts that had 20 or more greater percent of free and reduced lunch, and we don't have that. So I don't think that's going to be available. The number one thing here on this, the thing I just handed out is this. I brought it up at the town council meeting the other night. Now, in the Jacobs report, it talks about optimum functional capacity of a school, and Mr. Conti's talked about this, how in a high school especially, you have a mobile student body. You have block scheduling, so not every room is used at every specific time. So there are spaces in that school during the day that are not used. So the reason that's critical is, it says here in the Jacobs report, that the optimum percentage of occupancy for a high school is between 75 and 85%. Now, you've been talking about building a high school for 703 students. A few weeks ago, it was 703 students times 225 square feet a student, because we were going to hopefully get the added space for our CTE programs, but it would be school-wide. Now you've been told that we're not eligible for that, so now we're down to the 200. But then you had Mr. Carreno the other day, last week, say, oh, but maybe you would want to not look at 200, maybe you would want to look at something less than that. I don't see why we would do that. Because if you read also in this thing, I've done some research and finally got the numbers. Over the last 2 years, we've had over 600 students that live in South Kingstown that don't go to our schools. That's 1 in 5 students. That's an unbelievable number. Seriously. If you look at the best school districts in Massachusetts, a school district like Belmont, just for 2 categories, students that go to other schools in Massachusetts and students that go to charter schools, their percentage is 0.5, 1/2 of 1%. Ours is 9, almost 10%. And that money, I know.
That's your 5-minute, no.
I know, but that money,
No, you can't talk around.
the money that we send,
Doral.
right, the money that we send out of district comes right off the top.
Doral, I respect your input. And
Except
I
you don't want
think
any more of it. I
we've
agree.
heard some of this before, but I appreciate it. But I want to, if nothing else, I'm consistent, right? 5 minutes is 5 minutes. Well, you actually got 10 this time, so we gave you 10-5 last time. I think you make, one thing, I think you make some good points. And so Doral knows I did pass out his communication. You all have the attachments, right? First thing I'll say. Second thing, green technology. I think it's a good point. Phil, if I remember correctly, there is something in existing regulation. This happened in Coventry. They're pointing us in the direction of the 1% to 2% kicker on the green energy. It's buried. It's not something that's highlighted. So it's there. And I'm going to task you, can you find that for us? My understanding previously was that it could be added on to your base and the bonuses. That's the way it was presented previously to me. And then Mario, I was surprised that Mario said that would not be the case. So I'd be interested in see what the regulation is. The 40% bonus, I don't know. I don't know what the legislature is going to do this session. I would urge the council, if there's anything on the table related to school building incentives, to pass a resolution, or pass a resolution endorsing it. and trying to move in that direction. If there's an extra 5% to be had, then grab it. Right. So we'll see what comes out this year. Obviously, that didn't happen, so, we'll keep our eye on it. The last thing I'll say with regards to the building square footage, to be continued, right? We said this earlier. I don't think we've settled on anything. The guidance that I've gotten and Phil's gotten from Mario is, you can't count that 225. That was clear. He said you can't count that across that 50%. So we've worked to reduce the gap. I think it's a real discussion we need to have. I felt personally uncomfortable talking about less because I do think it sets us up for potential failure long term. You've seen what happens to this high school. They didn't expect growth, so they kept adding. So I do think that the state, and I'll say this respectfully to Mario, the state wants to provide those reimbursements. It looks good for the state that money's getting shoveled out the door. So they're trying to close the gap to get a project for us that's palatable. On the flip side, we need to get a project that the committee feels is appropriate for the student body and the school committee feels is programmatically correct. So I think that's the discussion we're going to have once we kind of boil down some of these other discussions. So with that, Doral, I'll just say, hold that idea. I don't think the committee's settled on anything yet, and I think it's a real point of discussion. So the comment's a comment, Doral. That's, I get it, but yeah. Again, you can write us. I will pass it on. All right. Scheduling a next meeting. So we didn't have, I don't know what we had on the calendar, to be quite honest. We didn't have one. So here's what I'm going to suggest is, obviously we're in the holiday season. I don't think much is going to happen the next 2 weeks, right? So I'm going to suggest maybe something the first week of January.
January 5th.
I thought we had something on the books for January 5th already.
I can do that week. Next week I can't.
Did
we have something on the books for
I think we
January
did talk
12th?
about this.
Yeah, I think we have one on the books for the.
Fourth and fifth of CIP? Okay. So I think we had something on the schedule already for the 12th.
For the 12th?
You gotta be
Had
going?
one on the books for the 12th too.
No, I don't have anything.
We could do it.
Master schedule says the 5th? Okay.
Does.
So we're hearing that the master schedule has the 5th.
Yep. So I thought.
CIP, I think, is with us also, right? Ours on the 5th. So,
The third we can't do, there's a town event, so that Jim and I are obligated. So that week looks like it's out, perhaps the following week, the following Tuesday?
I believe the
or-
master also has something on the 12th too.
Yeah, we did, and that was originally put out because we were planning in advance. Obviously, we're gonna have a conflict on the 5th. And the 12th, we did have that on the schedule. We could do that.
is it you said you can be on the 12th?
If the majority can make the 12th, then I think we've got to kind of pick a majority date. No offense. So we'll stick it to the 12th for now.
12th
We'll
at 5.
put it up. If anyone has any major conflicts, let me know. But we'll plan on January 12th of 2023.
Yep.
The next meeting. I'll post that out. All right, and then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks, everyone.
1729. 1 minute spare.
Was I too harsh?